A lot of good things that are exciting that are happening throughout the organization, and I think I'm excited about it because I think that really is a good way to go and start getting us being viewed by the public as one organization, and understand that we're all part of one big family, which I think is very important to look at. Which brings to this issue as well, high-performance organizations and what that means. Let me give you some context here. The last few years have been tough for this organization. We saw our organization reduce in total number of employees by about 11%. Over 400 employees left the organization. We reduced our ongoing expenses by about $47 million. Yet during that same time period, when we did our citizen survey activities during that 2-year period, our employee, if you will, I guess our citizen satisfaction went up. It went up. This is a good organization. It's a great organization. But how do we go ahead and provide an environment that indeed we're going to do even better in the future? Here are some things I think we're going to know about. We're never going to have enough people to do all that we need to get done on a regular basis for the demand. We're never going to have enough money to go ahead and do all that the community is demanding of us. I come back 20 years from now, this will be the same story. It's been our story the last 150 years, right? So how do we cope with that? How do we create an environment that indeed allows you all to go ahead and bring the best, your A game, to work every day? How do we create the system, strategies, and the structures that says, you got a great idea, it's just not going to die in your head. We're going to give you systems to go ahead and bring those things forward and to kind of make indeed those ideas kind of be real for you. And that's what I think that's what the high performance organization is talking about. It's not saying that we are not already high performing, we are. But how do we go ahead and be better a month from now than we are today? And how do we create that situation, all of us, so that people that succeed us, and guess what, all of us including me, are going to be gone at some point in the future. What sort of legacy are we going to leave for our coworkers that succeed us? That indeed, you're going to come into Johnson County, we're going to bring your A game, we're going to bring your full measure of your talents and expertise, and make sure that our kids and grandkids have a great place to live like we have it today. It's the area we talk about a culture of constant improvement. That's what the bottom line is. Basically trying to tap the energies and talents and resources, engage employees to release the energy, empower employees, motivate employees, and strengthen a sense of common purpose. You just got released, I think, yesterday, the employee engagement survey. I hope you all go online and go ahead and fill those out and let us know your true feelings and opinions. That gives us a sense of how well we're doing these activities. How well are we engaging with you? And I think we're doing okay, but not nearly as good as we can from my perspective. It's going to be difficult for us to change a culture to one of a constant improvement activity. And I think as I talk about a culture of constant improvement, it says that responsibility is not just mine, but it's everybody's to go and make that happen. I talk about in some sessions the idea of the movie of Glory. Remember the movie Glory? Maybe you may, as far as that's concerned. That's about the all-black regiment that came into being during the Civil War that went and eventually attacked Fort Morgan, which they knew at that point in time was going to be somewhat of a suicide mission. And indeed, they took that mantle on, and wave after wave, people indeed get wounded and got killed in that activity. But what happened to the American flag? Somebody always came along and picked that flag and carried it one step forward, and carried it one step forward, and carried it one step forward. That's how we're going to survive in this organization from my perspective as well. I'm not saying you need to go ahead and fall on your sword for that activity, okay? But it gives you the impression of what I think that's the culture of constant improvement, that we're all in this together, that indeed, if you have a great idea, we owe it to our coworkers, we owe it to our families and friends to go ahead and make this the best organization and our best departments that we can on a regular basis. That's kind of the concept. When we talk about that, we kind of, in some cases, are our own worst enemy. But we want to try to let vision and values govern our organization, not systems and structures. We have legacy systems, processes that currently drive our culture, that support an anti-innovation culture and constraint talent. How many pages do we have in our policy manual? 300? 400? We tend in this organization, by virtue of the last 150 years, that somebody screwed up, so then we go ahead and punish the 99.9% of us that are still here for what that one person did that's no longer here. Right? That's a legacy system. Can we ameliorate all those? Probably not, because guess what? We've got 550,000 people that have expectations. We have some rules out there to make that work. But if we can modify those in some modest way and try to be driven by common vision and values, then perhaps we can reduce some of those archaic and very restrictive requirements to allow you to go ahead and exert influence and adult thinking in your day-to-day lives. That's really kind of the culture we're trying to go ahead and put in place. Now that is for some people's thinking, very, very difficult to go ahead and do. That implies some responsibility, but I think that's the direction we're trying to go ahead and make happen. We're trying to free talent and find new ways to improve service delivery. Let me give you another story. For those of us who've been around the block for a while, 25 years ago, I've been a professional for 25 years. I remember that when we had the old Gestetner machine to go ahead and do mimeograph of activities for getting out information to everybody. We'd take the little thing off, and you had to go and kind of plug the holes with cement. It got really kind of fumigation in the rooms and those. That's how we communicate with our employees. Now we do it by fax, by email, obviously, but also by tweets, obviously, but instant messaging and those sort of things. These things were wearing all the darn time. I could never predicted that 25 years ago. What's going to happen the next 25 years, I'm not quite sure, but I think we have to adapt ourselves to be ready for that. We've got to forecast it. We've got to be ready for it. We've got to go and adapt ourselves to make all that thing happen, from my perspective. So this is what it kind of works in graphic format, that we understand that performance, and we all have performance, are driven by our system strategies and structures, all the activities that we have. And we know that indeed the culture drives those system strategies and structures. What we believe in people and how we think the nature of work is drives those activities. And we know that what drives basically the culture is the vision and values that we have. Let me give you a little more context about that. One of the cornerstones of this is, what do we think about the nature of work? What sort of context do we have with you all in terms of how much trust do we have? Let's start about from this perspective. Years ago in the 1800s, and probably the last 20,000 years prior to that point in time, we indeed were an agrarian society, and guess what? We all were responsible for all the activities for the farm to make that work in this instance. We planted the seed, we harvested the seeds, we marketed the seed, we go ahead and got fuel for the tractor in this case, we try to figure out what kind of legacy was going to be left for our family beyond that point. It was all inclusive. We were micro businesses, we were our own business person. What do we do a few years later? The industrial age comes along. And individuals now are asked to say, well, we have the great thing, we got the automobile. We've got to crank them out by the thousands. And guess what? We'll be much more efficient and more consistent if we go ahead and have you be on the line and you do widget number 58 for 8 hours a day. And we're going to ensure that we get consistent quality. We're going to manage performance. We're going to put system strategies and structures in place to make sure that at the end of the line, number 1 looks just like number 5,866. And that worked great for us. We took over the world with that activity. You have the shop floor out here, and you have people sitting on top of ladders. They had excellent vision. In fact, they had supervision. Where do we get the term supervisor? From supervision. Okay? Is that the nature of work now? No, it looks a lot more like this. I'm in meetings like this all day long. Why? Because we've got to harness the specific talent people have in different areas to go ahead and solve a problem that's on that day we didn't forecast 3 months ago. At DMV, we couldn't have forecasted the debacle we had with the state of Kansas trying to bring forward the computer system that didn't work very well. So we had to bring in forward system strategy, people that were very talented to go ahead and migrate that thing and say, how the heck do we fix this sucker? Knowing that we have no control over it. That's the kind of situation we're going to be in and day out from my perspective. So we've got to put in place systems that allow you to go ahead and be successful in this kind of environment. And part of it is the nature of work activity, what we think about work. And so we worked hard as an organization to kind of start this area about our leadership philosophy. Is it perfect? No. We're going to try to work at it some more, but we're going to be using this as a point of departure. And I want to walk you through it. Leadership is a responsibility shared by all. Whoa! I thought it was just Hannes' job. You know, let him be responsible for this massive group of 3,800 people in an operation of $850 million. Because I always know how to go ahead and plow Homestead Road. More better than anybody else, right? No, that's folly. That is folly. I can't do it all. What I can do is try to give you the passion to go ahead and kind of exude and put system strategies and structures in place that allow you to go ahead and bring those issues forward. So a public relations is a better idea to go ahead and put a management team together. We've got to figure out ways to allow you to do that. If we say facilities is a better way to go ahead and clean buildings and maintain the chillers and so forth, we've got to provide a way to go ahead and make you do that. If we have managed employees and say if you did a route this way, we would save more people's lives, we've got to provide an opportunity to make that happen. That's kind of the culture we're talking about. So the nature of work here is, first of all, says leadership's not just my responsibility, it's a responsibility shared by all. We're all adults in this situation. We need to depend on you to make that happen. We trust and empower each other to do the right thing for the right reason for the public good. Let's try that. We trust and empower each other. How many times have you been, for those who've been around for a while, say we bring in a new employee and say, I'm not sure I can trust you. You know, well, you got to prove your mettle before I go ahead and release it. No, they've run the gauntlet. They have proved their mettle for us to go ahead and say, you are trustworthy when you come in this organization. Unless indeed you screw up, and then we're going to have to have a conversation about it. But how do you go ahead and get trust? You've got to extend trust. So we trust and empower each other. Not just me, you entrust your coworkers to go ahead and do a good job. And when that trust is violated, we're going to hold them accountable and we'll have a conversation. But out of the box, we want to trust and empower you to do the right thing for the right reason for the public good. It didn't say the right thing for the right reason for Hannes Zacharias. It's for the public good. What sort of legacy are we leaving? One thing I found in this process is that everybody wants to leave a legacy. Everybody wants to go ahead and say the work they're doing is meaningful. You all, me, your coworkers, and so forth. So how do we go ahead and create that kind of environment that at the end of the day we're trying to go ahead and make this place better than we found it? That's fundamentally from the issue. So that our transition, our successors will indeed build upon those activities. So we do it for the public good. Committed to our shared values, value-based activities, some things you can't do according to our values, and we'll talk about those. We provide excellent public service, not mediocre, not half-hearted, but excellent public service, seeking always to improve ourselves and our organization. There's the issue about constant improvement for making that happen. Ourselves, only the machinery, if you will, is only as good as the individual parts. Keeping ourselves going. So yeah, do we have to go ahead and provide an environment where you go ahead and get more training? Yeah. Do you find that you get more success by those activities? You bet. We got to keep our saws sharp, as Stephen Covey would say, to make those things happen. I like this statement at the end very much. Together we will leave our community better than we found it. And where did that come from? It came from this wonderful area, the Acropolis, from Greece. That's the Athenian Oath. In Athens, when indeed people are trying to go ahead and be part of the civilized society in Athens, Greece, they had to go ahead and take an oath, which basically said they're not going to not only leave that place worse, but better than they found it. These are 1,000 years old kind of concept, our basics of democracy. That's what we're talking about. At the end of the day, we're all about trying to leave this place better than we found it, and that's the part that I think is very important. Let's also talk about the vision when we talk about what kind of place we're trying to strive as an organization. Johnson County Government Vision Statement. What are you trying to strive for? And the vision has to be something that indeed inspires people, I hope it does, but it's also unattainable and very difficult to achieve, or else why it's not really a vision, it's kind of, oh, it's a great idea. This is going to stretch us, I get it. But one of the fundamental things is saying we choose to be a different kind of government. We choose. This is not forced upon us. It's our choice. You have a choice to be here today or not. You have a choice to go ahead and be employed here or not. You have chosen to go and dedicate your resources, your life to public service. And I'm happy you do. This is a joyful profession. But you have a choice here. We choose, us 3,000 people, to go ahead and be a different kind of government. One that indeed I think, we'll talk about more specifically, but you talk about a general context. It talks about what are people's perception of government right now. Not very good. What's the legacy? It's good enough for government work, right? I want to change that philosophy. We want to be a different kind of government. We understand that indeed performs very highly, has public interest in mind to go and make those things happen. Additionally, what it confers to me is that we're going to be different tomorrow, a year from now, than we are today, because we're going to be in that path of constant improvement. But we choose to be a different kind of government. What kind? One that inspires trust for who we are and pride in what we do. Trust. That's a cornerstone. People trust us to go ahead and use the taxpayers' dollars in the most efficient and effective way. They trust us with what? Literally, if you're Med-Act, with their life. They trust us to go ahead and collect the taxes in an appropriate way that indeed it's fair and equitable. They trust us to go and make sure services are delivered irrespective of their ability to go ahead and of their financial status, the color of their skin, the gender, what they look like, those sort of things. Everybody gets that kind of equal treatment under our Constitution by virtue of our Bill of Rights. Those are foundational for us. And we have that trust from the community to go and make those things happen. One that inspires trust and pride. One that dares to imagine what can be and strives each day to make a difference. Somebody had to go ahead and imagine a wastewater. Why don't we go ahead and do something with this grease? Why don't we go ahead and figure out what we can do to go ahead and take a waste product and turn it into something that actually generates electricity that reduces our overall expenses? Somebody had to think about that. Somebody had to imagine that, had to dare and say, well, how do we let's go and apply for a grant. Somebody had to figure that out. I'm trying to create a culture that makes that more possible for everybody on a regular day out and day out basis. One that cares about the health, the character, and the promise of community. The health. It's obvious from a public health perspective, but how healthy is this community? How well are people educated? How safe do we feel? How in a sense, do we have an environment that indeed nurtures our families to go ahead and be better than they are right now? The character. Do we do things in a way that reinforces our democratic values, that makes everybody feel welcome, everybody has equal access to our services, that at the end of the day people say, I want to go ahead and be here. One that cares, and on that day, that promise of community. I do believe that the ones who care about this community of Johnson County of 550,000 people is us. At the end of the day, we're responsible for that activity. We've got 5 school districts, so they care about Johnson County to a degree, but not their way to it. We've got 20 cities. They're not really care about Johnson County. We are responsible, as our 3,800 employees, to breathe life in this jurisdiction we call Johnson County. And there are some promises there that indeed when people move into this community that they're infirm promises. Guess what? We're going to plow the snow. And we're going to make sure it's done in an efficient and effective way. We promise that if you have to go ahead and get someplace in the rural area, that you can get from your place you live to where you need to work, or the ambulance can get to your house, because that's what we do. That's our promise to you. We promise that indeed if you pay us the taxes, it's going to be spot on. It's going to be accurate. It's going to be distributed fairly. Those sort of things. We promise you that if you call our organization, somebody's going to answer the phone, treat it with respect and expertise to go ahead and get those things taken care of. That's the promise of community. That's what we're talking about. Through our service, Johnson County will always be, not sometimes, but always be an extraordinary place, second to none. There's some controversy about that. There's some kind of thing that indeed we are highfalutin to begin with. Well, but then a lot of people say that we're not saying if people can't join us. We want to be second to none. We want to be an extraordinary place. That's our striving to make that happen. Fundamentally, a place where people want to be, to work, to live. People get a choice to go and vote with their feet. If we're not delivering the services well, what's going to happen? They're going to make a choice and say, Johnson County was pretty good, but now it's not quite as good as I thought it was going to be. I think I'm going to move to Denver. I think I'm going to move to Omaha. Maybe I feel better in San Francisco. Those sort of things. We want to make that place so we want to make it inviting enough that people want to be here. They want to work here. They want to live here for their families from that perspective. So what? Hopefully this activity, I think and so far we've done some of these activities the last year. We've done what's called the LEAP training program, where we try to bring in certain employees to the organization into what we call LEAP training, which is Leadership Empowers All People program, to try to give some understanding about this idea of high-performance organizations. We have about 400 to 500 people going through that activity. We've been working at about 2 years. What's been different? I think we're seeing better communication between departments and agencies by virtue of that. I do sense a better understanding that we're all in this together. Part of that is indeed the branding initiative that says we're not separate, we're all one entity, we're all one family. I was in a meeting the other day. We're having some issues right now with mental health, and we're working with JCDS activities, and they said, I'm sorry that we're going to be taking some resources from JCDS to go ahead and be over here in another department. He says, hey, we're all part of one family. It's the same saddle. That was great to say we're not just individual silos, we're all in this together. That's the kind of ethos we have to create. They're all in this together. Develop a renewed sense of common purpose. We're doing this with regards to ourselves, for the betterment of this community, to reinforce democratic values. That's important from my perspective. I think it releases some energy with employees. If you talk to those folks that are involved in the LEAP program, they come out really energized. You may have realized some of that energy in your departments as well. We're trying to go and create, opportunities to make everybody aware of that, but I do think there's a sense of energy among those employees to say, here's a point. People have often said that in an environment, they've been working there for years and years, and finally at the retirement they say, well, why didn't you bring up these ideas to go ahead and try to improve the operation? We got a moment to talk about that. And the answer comes back to say, well, nobody asked me. Nobody wanted to go ahead and really wanted one of my brain power. All they wanted was my brawn, and that's what I gave them. They didn't expect anything else. We expect more from that activity, and I hope that releases people's energy to go ahead and bring their personal passion forward in this organization. Recession management, the budget personnel reductions. I think some of the examples we've done here recently, we did reduce the budget the last several years. You know that, but we did it in an environment that tried to say let's not do across-the-board cuts. We enlisted department heads in that conversation and said, how are we going to go ahead and make these cuts that make sense? Out of our 200, 350, 500 different services, which was number one, which is number 550, and how do we go ahead and respect all the value for those sort of things and the employees in there to make budget cuts? We did that very effectively from my perspective. We reduced our employees, as you said before. We didn't do it by layoffs. We did it by attrition. We maintained your status as far as here that's concerned. We did maintain a good pay structure. We're adding to this next year by 3% as well, which is important. And the citizen survey results, as I said before, during this time period, we actually increased our customer satisfaction by, indeed, several percentage points, which during this environment is really incredible, one of the highest in the country. Next steps, We want to go ahead and complete the organization, operation, and end values. We've got to figure those out. We'll get those out to you. Trade department and agency personnel. We're trying to get this information down to you all. I'm very concerned that two things. Once you label something, it becomes the flavor of the day. And I feel bad about that. I've been around for a quarter of a century. You all are smart people. Is this a deal that this is Hannes's fad? It's going to be here for a couple of years and it's out the next year. Do I really go and pay attention or not? I don't want it to be this way. This is a way of thinking. This is a culture. How we go ahead and improve ourselves on a regular basis. So there's some trepidation about giving it a name whatsoever. So I think I'm curious about that. Second of all, I'm concerned about it being somewhat inside baseball versus outside baseball. Well, the department heads know about HPO. Supervisors know about HPO, but I don't know about HPO. I have no connection to it. We're trying to find ways to break that cycle and make sure everybody understands what the principles are for HPO and the kind of principles for creating a culture of constant improvement, which is probably more to the point. That's going to take some time. In an organization of our size, it's hard to train everybody at one time. So we're trying to work that stuff through and make it last. So be patient with this if you will. But I think this exercise, as far as chat with Hannes, should give you some insight about how we're trying to go to make that work. Define high performance for us and how it is measured. We're all about measurement in a sense to a degree, but part of it being a high performance organization is how would we know when we get there? What are the kind of milestones that says we've achieved it and where we're going to be going? We got to define that for ourselves. And some great work's being done. Corrections department's doing some great work about trying to deal with really outcome measures instead. Fundamentally, our job is to make sure people don't commit crimes again. That's a heavy-duty issue. For the Human Services Department is saying we want to make sure people are self-sufficient, that indeed they don't have to go ahead and come back again and again and again. Wouldn't that be nice? Teach them to go ahead and bake bread and make their own, teach them to go and fish, that kind of concept, those sort of things. So we're working on it, but it's a tough task for our 32 different departments to make that realistic from that perspective. Train and retrain staff, ongoing effort. As we go down this activity, I would fully realize or suspect that we'll have LEAP programs going on in the future for the next several years. And as we have an attrition rate, people cycle in this organization, 400, 500 people a year. New people are coming in, we've got to find a way to go ahead and get them into this new culture as well. And say, you want to be here, we want to bring here the full talent, here's how we operate in our organization, here's our culture to make that work. Practice, practice, practice. We're not going to get perfect at this. I can't guarantee success. I can guarantee you failure. If we don't try, we'll never make it. I guarantee it. I'm unwilling to not try. I want to try. I want to try to go ahead and create a culture that indeed you're proud of. That indeed you feel like you were able to go ahead and bring the full measure of your talent. We got to create that system of structures to make that happen. Wouldn't it be neat if everybody on the front line felt like they were a major contributor in this organization and their word was valued and valuable? And they're able to go ahead and modify their work-life conditions so they make the community better. Would we be a different organization to make that happen? I think so. That's a two-way responsibility. Supervisors have to be in a way to go ahead and value individuals' contribution. And guess what? All of us as workers have to go and be willing to contribute. We can't just check out and say, oh, guess what? I'm just showing up here from 8 to 5. All I got to do is drive the truck. That's it. No. As adults, we have an obligation to say, if you let me go and do the route a little bit different, we can do this. Instead of buying that, let's go and buy this. That's the obligation. We've got to go ahead and make supervisors available to hear, and we've got to provide an environment where employees speak. And that's tough culture, because not many places in this country do that I've seen, and put meaning into it. So we're swimming upstream here to a degree. But I think that at the end of the day, I think the legacy I want to be part of leaving, it's not just mine, it's all of us, is indeed a place that our successors, again, find an environment where they can be the best we possibly can be. And so when the next generation comes around, the next advance, either be the risk communication device, whatever it's going to be, more telecommunications activities, that we're in a position to go and keep on delivering the services to the public that need to happen to provide a great place to live, work, and raise a family.